Welcome to Urban America, where communities go to die. Pull up a seat or your overpriced ergonomic cantilever chair, and let's dive into why our cities are less about neighborly connections and more about overpriced coffee shops, passive-aggressive parking disputes, and being afraid. In this video, I will show you why America and its cities have turned us into cold, unhappy introverts in a dead society. Grab a drink, it's gonna be a long ride. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, the almighty car. Ah, the car. The metal box of solitude that lets us scream sing Taylor Swift and avoid eye contact with strangers. Beginning in the 1940s, most urban environments in the United States lost their streetcars, cable cars, and any other form of light rail to be replaced by diesel-run motor coaches or buses, which had a smaller capacity than the trains, and they could change routes when needed. Everyone else drove their car. Over the last few decades, some urban communities saw the loss had affected their cities in a negative way and started returning to rapid transit rail systems. But as the trains started rolling again, they noticed something had changed from pre-World War II trains and streetcars. People had lost that community feeling on the trains. Nobody talked. This was no longer an extension of the water cooler where people saw the same people on the train 5 days a week as in the old days. They now spend those trips doing work, reading, texting, and social media, of course. You might as well just drive to work and listen to your Amazon Audible account and catch up on the latest Stephen King book or something. Cars are great for road trips and alone time, but terrible for communities. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 85% of Americans commute by car, and in urban areas, that means endless traffic jams instead of charming chats on public trains. Walkable neighborhoods? It's not really much of a thing anymore. We traded those for freeways and Costco parking lots years ago. The train used to be a social event. You would see coworkers. You would meet new people. People got jobs, businesses got started on the train through conversations. Go on the train now. You don't talk to anyone unless you actually got on the train with that person and you know them very well. Number 9, mixed-use development. This is just a buzzword. Developers love to slap this term on brochures, but what they really mean is a yoga studio above a Chipotle with zero actual spaces for people to interact. Real mixed-use areas would have parks, libraries, and community centers, not $12 smoothie shops. Apartment buildings in California, where I grew up, had courtyards. Or at least they did have courtyards if they were built prior to the 1980s. The mix we're getting is just overpriced residential units stacked on top of retail tenants that go bankrupt every 6 months. These types of units have extremely high turnover rates compared to condos, houses, and traditional apartments with the courtyards and common areas. In a lot of cases, they have deals worked out with giant corporations where they house workers for a month or two. Back in the 1990s, I lived in an apartment building and Toyota had several of the apartment units in my building that were just a turnover of people coming over from Japan, working for 3 months and then disappearing. You never get a chance to know these people. They're gone before you have your second hello with them. You know, that first month or two, you're just nodding acquaintances. You know, give them a nod as you walk by. Finally get to the point where you know them well enough or you've nodded with them enough that you could actually say something to them and it's usually hello, how's your day? And then they're gone like a week later. These days, more people have stronger relationships with their Amazon driver than they do their neighbors. Number 8, everyone's married to their screens. Who needs a potluck with neighbors when you've got Netflix and YouTube with, of course, World According to Briggs playing on it, which is time well spent if you ask me. The average American spends 7 hours daily staring at screens. Double that if you're doom scrolling about the state of the world during election season. Why talk to the guy down the hall when you can binge watch a show about British people baking cakes? Or watch 150 takes on who Jake Paul's going to fight next? Social media was supposed to connect us. Instead, it's turned us into digital hermits. My youngest son talks to his friends every day for hours at a time via the computer. He puts on a headset and they're all connected. They just happen to be in different rooms, in different cities in some cases, and I know in one case, it's a different country. And it's not just the social media. We want groceries? We can have them delivered to our apartments or our house. No need to go to the grocery store to pick up on the local divorcee. She's probably on Tinder. Need dinner? It'll be there in 30 minutes. Forgot to pick up dog food? No worries. Target will have it there in an hour. I thought a lot of this would end after the pandemic. That's the most contact some people had was with the delivery person. They'd wave at them as they dropped off their food and drove away or something. No, it's continued. I'm guilty of it. I'm not casting any shade on anyone. That's how they do it. I do this all the time. And I just realize it's tearing the fabric of this country down. A lot of people think it's a better way to go. I don't think so. Number 7, NIMBYs, heroes of isolation. If you don't know what NIMBY is, it's not in my backyard, folks. Those are the people that, they do everything they can to make life miserable to newcomers or potential newcomers. NIMBYs are suburban commandos who infiltrated urban areas, fighting valiantly to ensure nothing ever gets built. Affordable housing? No thanks. Community gardens? Sure, but what if people show up? These warriors of stagnation ensure that cities remain a patchwork of exclusion zones, driving rents up and neighbors out. These type of people are the ones that love HOAs. They always become the HOA president, and for some reason, they think that makes them the king of Mulberry Street. HOAs, in my opinion, are the worst, and cities love them. You know why cities love them? Sidewalks cracked? The HOA is going to take care of it. The street needs resurfaced? The HOA is going to take care of it. But HOAs are a nightmare too. The court systems don't like them. There are lawsuits every single year in every single city from HOAs and from the residents of HOAs suing the HOAs. Back in 2013, when a family in Missouri installed a backyard swing set and finished the wood with a muted purple stain, they thought the finish would go nicely with the purple and reds in their trees in the fall. Unfortunately, their HOA found this unacceptable. What followed was an escalating series of fines and letters threatening legal action, even jail time, all over a swing set color choice. Once the case actually got to court, the judge quickly ruled in favor of the homeowners, and they kept their swing set as it was. That HOA was now trying to find new ways to get rid of these people. Just recently, a HOA in Arizona tried to get rid of a young lady because they found out that she had an OnlyFans account. They tried to get her for running a business out of her house. Number 6, gentrification, where culture goes to die. Let's talk about how cities keep replacing long-standing communities with bubble tea emporiums. Gentrification displaces lower-income residents, often communities of color, in favor of trust fund hipsters and tech bros. Neighborhoods lose their soul, and the residents who once greeted each other on the porch are replaced by condo dwellers who think community means sharing the Wi-Fi password. Now, it's not always just a race thing. A lot of the time, it's just an income problem. They sell people on these neighborhoods and, let's say, a community back in the 1960s, 70s, and say, this is where you could live the rest of your life. 30, 40 years later, that community wants rid of you. They don't want a bunch of retirees and blue-collar workers underspending in the community. City councils are sometimes just as bad as an HOA. They get in there and they decide that they don't like the older homes in a neighborhood. I grew up in North Redondo Beach, California, and later on when we got a house, it was actually my wife's grandfather's house. That was in South Redondo, closer to the beach. Well, this was an old house built in the 1940s. And in the 15 years or so that we lived there, newer homes were springing up, and they hated houses like my house. It was an old beach hut, basically. My house literally cost half what some of these homes' mortgage was every month. One of my neighbors went on to be a city council member, and I think part of his deal was he wanted to get rid of some of the homes in that neighborhood, the older homes. Get rid of them. Find a way. That's my opinion on the dude. But this is the same old story that's been going on for a couple centuries now in the United States. Then the neighborhoods just turn into these soulless, to the property line mansions. Who needs a front yard? Number 5, workism and the hustle grind. Who has time to build a community when you're working 60 hours a week to afford rent in San Francisco or Brooklyn? Thanks to our obsession with productivity, your neighbors could be a serial killer and you wouldn't even notice. We've traded block parties in for LinkedIn connections, and it's depressing. Nobody knows their neighbors anymore. And most of the time it's because we're all working, or you're stuck in traffic trying to get home. I'm not saying they're all gone. I'm not saying, everyone's living like this, but it's a bigger part of American life than it's ever been. I was talking to Nick Johnson this summer. We went to VidCon, and he was explaining his little neighborhood he's living in North Carolina, and it's nice. They all hang out on the street the way it should be. I've lived in my current house for 5 years. I know one set of my neighbors to my left, and then I don't know anyone else on the block. The reason is, most of them are coming home around 7 o'clock at night from work. We might wave occasionally, but that's about it. I don't know how long we'll be friends with that one group to the left. Their dogs are so cute, I think my wife's planning on stealing them. Imagine that conversation on the porch. Did your wife jump the fence and steal Ben and Jerry? The dogs are adorable, I wouldn't blame her. Years ago, back in I think in the 90s, there was a show on Fox called TV Nation. The guy that ran the show, he did a little documentary where he hired an older gentleman to move into a neighborhood that had an open house. Now, this was in an affluent neighborhood in New Jersey. A bunch of people that commuted to New York City for work and then came back. This is before the internet, so they weren't, just working from home. Well, he did all kinds of things in the neighborhood to see if anyone would notice. He acted like an old loner and just very grumpy and did things like run a chainsaw in his backyard at like midnight, had a stake in the middle of the yard with a goat attached to it on a leash, and then it went missing one night, and he played on a stereo like really loud goat noises, and the chainsaw started. Nobody called the police. Nobody ever talked to him about it. After about a month of this, he put a sign on his front lawn that said, "Saturday, kids party, no parents." They finally called the police on him. But the funny thing about that, they had to light up the sign because everyone was coming home at night. Nobody saw the sign during the day. They were all out working. Number 4, urban planning. Here's a shout out to urban planners who thought it was a good idea to put giant highways through neighborhoods. Nothing says let's come together like a 6-lane monstrosity dividing our city. Parks? Who needs them when you have strip malls and parking garages that really no one goes to anymore? In major cities and their suburbs, front lawns are becoming a thing of the past. Developers see lawns as something that cuts into their profits. If you're developing a community of 500 homes and every one of them has a post-war urban style front lawn, you now have only 450 homes to sell. There's some really nice communities by where I live. They just built them, but I was looking at the yards and the front, back, and side. The backyard is big enough for maybe a kid's pool and a couple lounge chairs. I could lay down on the front lawn with my feet touching the sidewalk, and my hands can almost touch the first step to the porch. You don't even need a lawnmower for that. A sharp pair of scissors in 20 minutes should do just fine. If you want to go down the side of your house, your side yard by the fence, don't gain too much weight. You won't be able to fit. That, in my opinion, is one of the biggest problems. I mean, growing up, like most of you listening to this, you played with your friends. You ran around the neighborhood. You hung out on people's lawns and in their backyards. It's not a thing anymore. You don't see kids on their bicycles going up and down the block anymore. Me and my friends used to play touch football in the middle of our street all year long. It doesn't happen anymore, and I think the death of the American front lawn is part of the reason. Number 3, the luxury apartment epidemic. Nothing screams community like living in a fortress of overpriced luxury apartments, complete with a gym you'll never use and neighbors you'll never meet. These soulless high-rises are designed to maximize isolation while charging $3,000 a month for the privilege of pretending you're fancy. Now, these luxury apartments are especially prevalent in cities like New York, Chicago, Miami, and Seattle. They're like warehouses of sadness. Number 2, fear, the ultimate divider. Newsflash, fear-mongering sells. That's just a fact of life. I mean, about 1/3 of the people watching this video right now, if it doesn't have some kind of negative title or theme, you're probably not going to click on the video. But it's not just YouTube. We got 24-hour news to your next-door neighbor app. Everyone wants you to believe that the city is a cesspool of crime. You're going to be killed as soon as you walk outside your door. It's just a matter of time. If it's not today, it's going to be next week for sure. Every form of media does it. I'm talking every single cable news channel, every local news channel, every newspaper, and even politicians. They want you afraid because if you're afraid, you'll do things they want you to do. Vote for them, buy products, stay home and watch their cable shows. There's the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. Meaning that's the first thing the news or your cable news channel or the local news is going to start with. They want you scared, they want you hooked because you'll keep watching. In reality, it's not that bad. Sure, it can be. I go to major cities all year long. I've had one problem. I grew up in Los Angeles. I used to work in Compton. I did see a car with the trunk on fire going down the road one day. Yeah, that was weird, but no one was shooting at me. Funny thing is, the trunk was on fire and it was a convertible, like an old Cadillac or, whatever, big car. And there was a couch sticking out of the back seat. the convertible's down, the trunk's on fire, and there's a giant couch sticking out of the back seat. But they want you afraid. Why risk walking to the corner store when you could barricade yourself inside your open concept living room, right? It's safer there. What's really deceiving is a lot of the time they'll tell you crime rates, right? They'll say 20 out of 1,000 people watching this tonight will be the victim of a violent crime. That's just the number I threw out, but they'll tell you that, but they always seem to leave out the fact that a good portion of those violent crimes are happening in your own house with domestic violence, things like that. There's all kinds of other things they do with stats to make you afraid, to make you think crime is higher than it actually is. And if you're afraid, that also means you're afraid to talk to people. You're afraid to go places. And your community dies. All right, before we get to number 1, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, now's a good time. Go ahead and click the subscribe button. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, communication breakdown. People just don't talk anymore. In recent years, a slew of studies have unearthed a deeply troubling trend. Our communication skills are slowly but surely disappearing. Because who needs the ability to actually talk to people anymore, right? If you want to see proof, go any place that hires like teens and 20-year-olds. They can't talk. Customer service everywhere is horrible. Even Starbucks went in there couple of years ago and ran into a couple of girls that couldn't even have a normal conversation. They were just clueless. I was wearing a Comcast shirt and the girl behind the counter with her spray tan said, "Oh, my ex-boyfriend said Comcast is horrible." I said, "That's weird. My ex-girlfriend told me spray tan erodes your frontal lobe." She goes, "You still talk to your ex-girlfriend?" Well, yeah, we're still cousins, so yeah. There's like 8 people in line started laughing. She just had this confused look on her face. You know, a lot of these younger people go into jobs at customer service or anything like that. They don't know how to communicate with people. I had quite a few when I was at Netflix that they got a customer service job at a call center, and I'm trying to train these people, and they can't even communicate. I had to sit a couple of them down and said, "This is the secret to not getting fired. Learn how to talk to people." I said that to a little group of them one time. I'm all, you know what? Learning to have a conversation is like the secret to not get fired here. And this kid goes, like, now we have to talk to people or we're going to get fired? I was like, "You applied for a job at a call center." He looked at me like I was an idiot. Anyway, the reasons behind this communication breakdown are unsurprisingly exactly what you'd expect. We all know that face-to-face conversations are supposed to be the gold standard. But hey, it's way more fun to check your phone 85 times a day, right? After all, nothing says I'm engaged like staring at a screen while someone stands right in front of you. We'll always embrace the joy of instant digital connection, but somehow we've forgotten how to have a real conversation without a safety net of emojis and autocorrect. It's almost like we've invented a world where we're always available, but we're not willing to talk to you. In a world that's supposed to be more connected than ever, we're somehow getting worse at actually connecting, and it's killing American communities. All right, that's today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, you'll probably enjoy one of the 2 videos being suggested right now. Go ahead and click one of those. Everyone have a great day. Be nice to each other.